All right, here we go. Let's head to Ohio. The closing arguments have begun in the case against Paul Hicks, starting with the state.
Good morning. This jury is responsible for deliberating over the charges against a man who is now known solely for murdering the 25-year-old mother of a 4-year-old child. On October 18th, 2001, on a mild day, sometime after sunset, Paul Hicks assaulted his wife, Regina Hicks, hit her over the head, stuffed her into a passenger seat of her 1994 Camaro, left the address of 4463 Town Line Road 12, and drove towards Section Line 30 with his friend Steve Gates behind him. He then turned north on Section Line 30, turned into a property otherwise known as the Whetstone Pond, and launched his car, launched the Camaro into the pond, drowning and killing Regina. This all happened in Huron County. This is our county. You're going to go back to the deliberation room, and you're going to be giving the counts that are charged against the defendant, Paul Hicks. There's 4 charges. 3 murder charges and a kidnapping charge. And I'm going to frame what I have to say by reading those charges. Count 1, the defendant is charged with murder. Before you can find the defendant guilty, you must find beyond reasonable doubt that on or about the 18th day of October, 2001, and in Huron County, in Ohio, the defendant purposefully caused the death of Regina Hicks. Under count 2, the defendant is charged with murder. Before you can find the defendant guilty, you must find beyond a reasonable doubt that on or about the 18th day of October, 2001, and in Huron County, in Ohio, the defendant did cause the death of Regina Hicks as a proximate result of the defendant committing the offense of kidnapping. With count 3, the defendant is charged with murder. Before you can find the defendant guilty, you must find beyond reasonable doubt that on or about the 18th day of October 2001, and in Huron County, in Ohio, the defendant did cause the death of Regina Hicks as a proximate result of committing a felonious assault. Now, there was a lot to digest over a 90-day period of hearing witnesses and looking at exhibits. And certainly it could be overwhelming to take all that in with you into the deliberation room. So the prosecution is going to offer a suggested framework how to think about everything you've heard. Courts admonished this jury a number of times, and not because they distrust the jury, but to preserve the jurisprudence that goes involved with this process. And their concern was that the case had received a lot of notoriety, been very public. There's been a lot of published sources about what's happened. And there's a lot of stories over the past 24 years. So, thinking in journalist terms, what questions would you have to ask? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Now I'm going to go through those facts with those questions, not necessarily in the sequence of those questions that we all know. But I believe it would be very helpful for this jury to compartmentalize what you've heard as jurors, framed in those questions, to deliberate over the charges. Now, taking those questions out of sequence, the first question should be the easiest question. What is this? This is a homicide. It is a death of a person as a result of another person. You have an autopsy report and a coroner's verdict that tell you what had happened. And you had also had both Dr. Barnett and Dr. Harwood collectively explaining their findings. Specifically, Regina died of drowning. Dr. Barnett explained that her sinus cavity filled up with water and there was some mud in there. And that was to indicate she not simply drowned, but she drowned in a manner consistent with someone being submerged in a pond. Conversely, what that implicates is she didn't die. Regina didn't die from the assault. She died as a result of drowning. There was also hyperinflation of the lungs, which is indicative of drowning. And there was mud in her trachea, and not simply in the sinus cavities. She had no breast injuries. And that was significant because that confirmed what the first responders saw when they arrived at the scene October 22nd, 2001. Dr. Barnett's position was if she had been driving, she would have had bruising as a result of the steering wheel. Because of Regina's breast size, that would have created an impact, and it would not have been possible for Regina to have been driving. So right off with doctor's testimony, Regina wasn't in the driver's seat. She was squarely in the passenger seat. Regina also had bruising under her arms, what Dr. Barnett described as fingertip bruising. And fingertip bruising occurs when someone's holding you underneath your arms. This would have absolutely occurred when Regina was dragged into her Camaro. Regina also didn't have any wear against her fingernails. What Dr. Barnett explained to us is that indicates that there was no struggle in the car. Regina was unconscious when she died in that Camaro. She otherwise would have fought her way out of the Camaro. That's just a natural instinct that anyone would have when they're conscious. That wasn't Regina's position. And the toxicology report, despite many accusations, back in 2001, shows Regina had nothing more than Tylenol in her system. So there are no drugs. Dr. Barnett also explained that Regina still had French fries and sesame seeds in her digestive tract, which would explain the murder happened within hours of consumption. And I'll go into when, but that was Dr. Barnett's findings. So the murder would have happened within just eating, within a few hours of eating French fries. Dr. Harwood's verdict was changed, I believe, his amended verdict was changed May 26, 2022. That was almost 3 years before Steve Gates came forward. Verdict was not changed as a function of witness coming forward. It was changed because it was a murder. It was a homicide. And that was a result of renewed interest by the Attorney General's office in this case.
All right, there you have the mention of Steve Gates, that critical witness for the state. Joe Tamburino is with us. We'll get a break, but first, Joe, your thoughts on this cold case. Always difficult to prosecute, and something that's not here, which we do see in a lot of cold cases, is a wow moment of DNA or something that is tested. And this is it's a very nuanced prosecution.
I agree. What this is based on is testimony, pure, simple, old-fashioned testimony. And I don't see how, I think it's quite unrealistic to expect, if you were the defendant, a not guilty verdict. Not only do you have Gates' powerful testimony, you also have the defendant's own mother. I mean, the mom came in to testify against the son. You rarely see that, especially on this issue of the mom saying, look, the defendant said he had a twin. I never had twins. And then you have the defendant's own sister, Crystal, who came in saying, look, on the day in question of the alleged murder, my house was a mess and there was his muddy clothes in the tub. I mean, this is fabulous evidence for the prosecution.
Yeah, and you do wonder why they didn't roll the dice and prosecute him 40 years ago. But here we are.
Yes, I've wondered that.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Let's get a break. We'll get you back to the courtroom in Ohio for more of the state's closing argument. Stay with us. Welcome back to court.
That Regina Hicks was driving that vehicle. There's no evidence that Regina Hicks floated from the passenger seat, from the driver's seat to the passenger seat, which is what would have had to happen if she was going to commit suicide. Her relatives will also tell you, when they saw her that day, she was not suicidal.
Paul Hicks, 40 years, or not 24 years, or was it 40 years? 40 years. He was able to get away with murder, according to the state of Ohio. Not anymore. Closing arguments underway in this case. State is laying it out. Let's go back into the courtroom and pick it up where we left off.
The next easiest question you'll have to answer is where? Happened in Erie County. Of course, I would be remiss in not having an extended explanation as to where it is. This murder began at Steve Gates' residence and ended at the Whetstone Pond on Section Line 30. The Whetstone Pond Whetstone Pond is located immediately outside of Willard in the northwest corner, just down the road from 4463 Town Line Road 12. So on October 22nd, 2001, law enforcement responded to the discovery of what was ultimately a Camaro. Now, several days before, you have Roger Whetstone, who did not sound like he was helping out his father. It sounded like he was riding four-wheelers, like anyone in their younger, early 20s. And his father was feeding the hogs. He comes upon the pond, and he sees an item in the pond, and at that time, he would have no idea. And between him and his father, there's two theories. Either it's a dog in a bag, or it's a jet ski. I'm unsure if we testimony how they arrived at the jet ski, but that was the testimony. Be that as it may, Roger encouraged his father to immediately retrieve the item out of the pond, but there were things to do. Richard was a little bit busy, and then the next day it rained. So the inclement weather was not conducive to going out to the pond and discovering what this item was. Ultimately, the Whetstones borrowed a boat from a neighbor, launched the boat in the pond. Roger Whetstone proceeds out into the pond. Richard stays on the bank. They take what they describe as a stretch rope, attach it to what they believe is a spoiler, and with the supplement of a chain attached to the pickup truck, begin to pull what they discover is a white Camaro towards the bank. They can't pull it any further. They call law enforcement. They have some sense, based on the discovery of the purse, where this is going. So Dane Howard shows up. Bob McLaughlin shows up. Ted Patrick shows up. All of the members of the Sheriff's Department show up. As a result of this location being immediately outside of the city of Willard, along with Willard Fire. And of course, they have two guys who are divers. We're going to go in because that's how the investigation is going to get conducted. They ultimately pull the car out of the pond after discovering that there's a body on the passenger side of the car. And once it's removed, Regina's there. This happened in the Whetstone Pond, located in Huron County. Now, the next question would be when. And when is the arrival to answering that question is a result of a number of facts, and they're dense. There's a number of people you have to consider to figure out what time it was that Regina was murdered by the defendant. The people you have to consider are Carl Patrick, Chad Rowe, Dustin Patrick, Derek Hall, Jimmy Patrick, Lori Braunschweiger, Dave Battles. A good place to start, in fact, an imperative place to start, will be this JCPenney receipt from the Richland Mall. The date is 1807. That's 6:07 p.m. That receipt was found in the investigation. That's your start time for the analysis of when. The testimony was that Regina, with her boyfriend, Victor Mikey Perkins, were going to go shopping that day on October 18, 2001. They went shopping in Mansfield, got something to eat, did some shopping, and then came back to the Patrick compound on Old State Road. Now, if you have a receipt that's dated at 6:07 p.m., that's the earliest you're going to be leaving Mansfield. So at the time, 6:07, what it would take between Mansfield and between Plymouth and Willard, and that's what time they arrived at the Patricks. And remember, the testimony was that Regina and Mikey had stayed in the car when they arrived at the Patricks. They didn't get out. That would certainly suggest that they were on the move. They weren't going to stay long and exchange pleasantries beyond what they could do inside the car because they were headed back to Mikey's. So after leaving Richland County, they go to the Patrick compound. And the next stop is Washington Street in Willard. Now, after the Patrick farm, Regina and Mikey drove over to Washington Street. So they drove over there because, well, Mikey lived there. And he lived with a roommate named Derek Hall and his brother. Derek Hall is imperative because Derek locks in the end time by which Regina will be expected to be anywhere. Derek Hall works at Hardee's in Willard. He had a shift that began at 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. So wherever they're at right now, Regina agreed she would have Derek Hall to his shift at 9 p.m. Ostensibly meaning that he was going to be there before. Well, that's going to work out just fine because she's going to pick up her son Montana from the defendant out at 4463 Town Line Road 12. It's not that far away. And of course, Regina got roped into this because Mikey doesn't have a car, doesn't seem anyone is mobile, and no one was walking from Washington Street to the Hardee's in Willard. So from the Washington Street address, Regina then goes to Steve Gates' property, again at 4463 Town Line Road 12. Now, Jimmy Patrick, as a witness, did two things. He had a visual ID of Regina's car and the temp tag at Steve Gates' residence. He described what he believed to be a dusky time of night when he saw that Camaro. That Camaro was parked at Regina's. He saw it, and then he said that I believe there's a pole light shining off the back. So it was dark enough for a lamp to be illuminating the car as he drove by that evening on Town Line Road 12.
James Sitterly delivering the closing argument on behalf of the state of Ohio. We'll slip at a commercial break and get you back into that courtroom when we return.
A brutal killing sent shockwaves through Hollywood.
Rob Reiner and his wife murdered.
Court TV takes you inside the investigation
their own son charged with their murders.
as a community mourns, and a troubled son is now a defendant in a double murder.
We will commit ourselves to bringing their murderer to justice.
The Reiner Family Murders, a Court TV special tonight, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
The state of Ohio says 24 years ago, Paul Hicks drowned his wife. Now he's on trial for that murder. Let's go back into the courtroom. The state is delivering the closing argument.
Jimmy Patrick did something else. He also established that he had seen that car immediately before filling up the trains with diesel. Now, he kept the card. It was dated October 18th. And his first fill up the trains was at 8 o'clock. I believe it took him 15 minutes. And then he itemized every time he filled those trains. And he was at the train station, or he was filling those trains all night. Jimmy Patrick puts Regina right there, separate from any other witnesses, at the Steve Gates residence, right before 8 o'clock. Right before 8 o'clock. He got the fuel from in town. I believe the testimony was it went up Keeper Street to Town Line Road 12 and to where the train was, west on that road. Regina's own uncle saw her car there at the Gates residence. Of course, they recall they get a ride from Regina. You had to get a ride from someone else to make it on time for work. Regina was expected to be able to go over to her mother, Lucella, to drop off Montana after the exchange at Steve Gates' residence. And of course, that didn't happen. She was also, after a conversation back at the Patrick compound, expected to go to the Victory Inn. There was going to be some sort of karaoke, some sort of activity, and they were left waiting there as well. Take a look at this exhibit. It's dated October 18, 2001. It's a Burger King receipt. How do we know that? Because a Whopper Jr. combo was ordered. And a double Whopper combo was ordered. And along with that order came 2 orders of fries. Recalling Dr. Barnett's testimony, the timeliness of Regina's death happened within a few hours of eating those French fries. She was right there. She was right there. Regina was right there at 8 o'clock, murdered by 9 o'clock. And what happens by 9 o'clock? What happens right after 9 o'clock? There's a cluster of phone calls the defendant makes to try and salvage the evening. After murdering his wife and being double booked, he had to make sure everything was going to proceed as he had originally planned earlier in the evening. So the schedule imposed upon everyone at this time, by all facts, was that Regina left the Washington Street residence and met the defendant at 9, but it never happened. Thinking firstly, what would have to happen for that very fact dense pattern to not set up the timeline. Everyone between the Patrick compound and the Washington Street address would not simply have to, the memories would not have to simply escape them as far as the times. They wouldn't even recall that Regina was around. Now, the Patricks did say they believe she was around between 5 or 6, but it had to come later because of the JCPenney receipt. Think of what else would have to falter. Regina would have never had to agree to pick up Derek Hall and take him to Hardee's. So there was another time constraint she imposed on herself. That would also have to disappear as well. Jimmy Patrick, coming forward several days after Regina disappeared and upon Regina being found at that pond. That would also have to be absent as well. Regina's murder is locked right in on October 18, 2001, and specifically between 8 and 9 p.m. Those calls, as documented by Dave Battles and further expanded upon by Lloyd Braunschweiger, has the defendant active again, making calls, making contact right after he murdered his wife. There's dead space in between that call at 7:53 and right after 9. Plenty of time to drive a Camaro out in the country to the Till Pond. The when segues nicely into, I believe, the next appropriate question, which is how. How did Regina die? Well, she was murdered. For 24 years, Steve Gates is carrying around the secret of the defendant murdering his wife. He is asked and interviewed over 6 different periods from 2001 to 2015 what he knew, and he lied to law enforcement.
Let's get a break. When we come back, we'll get you back to Ohio for more of the state's closing argument. What will the defense say? We'll find out as well. Stay with us. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ted Rollins. Good to be with you. And for Julie Grant on this Friday. It's a busy Friday as well. And we are focusing on the state of Ohio, where closing arguments have begun in a cold case. 24 years ago, Paul Hicks, according to the state of Ohio, murdered his wife. He rendered her unconscious.
For law enforcement. And law enforcement knew it. They didn't have to keep coming back to him to try to get him to tell law enforcement what they already know, and that Steve was a witness. But it's not what you know, it's what you prove. And what you proved was Steve Gates was at that residence. What Steve Gates witnessed was yet another fight between the defendant and Regina Hicks. She pulls in, they start arguing. He's not listening to any of this. He goes in the garage, turns on the radio, and starts doing whatever it is he's doing in the garage. He does it for about a 15, 20-minute period. He emerges from the garage, and the car, where Regina originally had it, which is approximately straight behind Mr. Gates' house, is no longer there. The car is moved over to a much muddier portion of the Gates property. And that's a part of the property where Mr. Gates and the defendant were working on Mr. Gates' pond. Mr. Gates at the time had attempted to dig his own pond east of his house. He emerges from the garage. He sees the car. And as how everyone's eyes does, he's adjusting to what he sees to the east of him. He's approaching the car. He sees only the dome light. He comes upon the car, and there's a crumpled up Regina Hicks in the passenger seat. With Paul Hicks telling Mr. Gates, "You're going to follow me." Mr. Gates follows Mr. Hicks out of his residence. They head westerly towards Section Line Road, the top of the Karen-Wilhelm Bridge. Mr. Gates parks in the apron, the approach, the Whetstone property. And as Mr. Gates, with Montana in the back of the car, proceeds north, turns around, and comes back in, he sees tail lights in the air into the pond. The murder begins at the Gates residence, ends at the Whetstone Pond. How that car landed in the pond seems to be consistent among everyone's testimony. There weren't any marks on the bank of that car from where the car could have entered. It would have had to be, as not simply David Urey had said, where he saw no marks, but Steve Gates as well. And again, Dr. Barnett said that Regina put up no resistance when she was in that car and sank to the bottom of the Whetstone Pond. She drowned unconscious. Regina's never coming home. She's never going to see her mother. And she's not going to see Montana, because they were deceased. Now we had a number of witnesses, we had a number of experts come in. Ms. Rose, Mr. Ross, Ms. Bison. They all provided testimony regarding hair samples, DNA. It didn't show Mr. Hicks. But you know who else it did show? Any other suspects? There was no one else. It couldn't have possibly been anyone other than the defendant. And frankly, why would you find DNA on the defendant? Immediately after the murder, he's busy muddying up his sister's house and washing the DNA and whatever else is on his clothes into the bathtub drain. And of course, the same evening, this mysterious money boot bandit comes by and takes the defendant's boots because they just happen to be his size. Now, in your jury instructions, There is a portion that's relevant to the how, and I'm going to read those to you. For count one, you do not to do an act purposefully is to do it intentionally and not accidentally. Now, you can't accidentally hit somebody, stuff them in the car, in the passenger seat, drive them down the road, and then aim for the pond, and then drown that person. That's not accidental. That's intentional. In count two, it must be established in this case that at the time in question there was present in the mind of the defendant a specific intention to kidnap Regina Hicks, which has approximately resulted in the death of Regina Hicks. The death is not required to occur at the exact time of the kidnapping, but maybe in the defendant's course of conduct immediately following the kidnapping. The defendant wanted Regina dead, and whether or not he knew she was alive, once he moved her against her will and she died, that's intentional and that's murder. In count three, there'll be an instruction for the felonious assault murder. Now take your pick on this one, because Regina's serious harm either resulted from both a blow to the head that was serious enough to render her unconscious, and then a car was used to kill her, which of course a car is a deadly weapon, or you just find that the car is a deadly weapon. Either one. Objection, Your Honor.
Quick sidebar.
Quick sidebar there. In the close, Matthew Mangino's watching. He's delivered many of these as a former prosecutor, now defense attorney. Methodical, low in tone, but maybe exactly what this jury needs. Your thoughts on this prosecutor's closing argument so far?
Well, Ted, he is, as you said, methodical. He's going through it point by point. I mean, there are a lot of issues here. I mean, this isn't an easy case because it's 24 years old and you don't have any real physical evidence, DNA, things like that, that you typically see in a case. So that makes it a little more difficult. But I think as he's going through this, he's not ranting and raving and pounding on the podium. That's not his style, obviously. But what he is doing is he's laying out the whole sort of map of how they got to this point and why this defendant, Paul Hicks, is guilty of murdering his wife. So while it's not showy, I think it's effective.
What do you think the defense is going to have to do to counter this? Because he's bringing up all this horrible testimony. You got the Steve Gates character who changed his story, says, yeah, he did it. Mom even testified against the defendant. Sister didn't like him. What would you do if you're defending him?
Well, if I'm defending him, I'm going to hit on there's no real physical evidence. We've heard witnesses come in here and tell stories. We've heard witnesses come in here and reveal things that they hadn't revealed for 24 years. And all of a sudden now they're saying that he's responsible for his wife's death. And so I'm going to pound away at that. This is all really circumstantial in a sense, and that we're basing it on what people remember or have thought about talking about 24 years after it happened. So I'm going to really play up this fact that there's really no evidence connecting him to this other than people telling a story about it.
All right, well, let's get a break, come back, more of the state, and then we'll see what the defense does right after this.
Do you think you deserve to die for murdering those innocent people?
You tell me.
Can you see how damning that evidence is? How do you explain that?
My goal is to make sure that you remember me for the rest of your life.
Oh my God. It looks more like fury than fear.
I felt guilty for that.
You felt guilty because, frankly, you were guilty.
Interview with a Killer. Marathon starting Christmas night, 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
We're tracking several cases across the country, as we always do. In Wisconsin, sentencing is expected for 16-year-old priest Larry. He faces up to life in prison after a jury convicted him of killing Tatiana Zek. In Utah, sentencing for Mia Bailey scheduled next hour. She pled guilty and mentally ill for brutally murdering her parents. And this hour, we are in Ohio. Closing arguments underway in the drowned wife murder trial for Paul Hicks, accused of killing his ex-wife, Regina. Let's go back into the courtroom now, pick up the state's closing argument where we left off.
Here's what the... Oh, hang on, just 1 second. Before Mr. Sitterly continues, he used the term of a deadly weapon, use of a deadly weapon. The charge in the matter does not require the use of a deadly weapon. It's not been proceeded in that fashion. So you disregard the use of the car as a deadly weapon. Certainly, the method of death is up to you to determine based on what you determine from the facts.
Thank you, Your Honor. What none of these acts are reckless. One does not accidentally or recklessly hit someone over the head, drive them down the road, turn off that road onto another road, and enter a property and have the acuity to launch a car to the pond. That's not reckless. That's intentional. There's also another instruction for the kidnapping charge. The defendant moved Regina by force to commit serious physical harm. He hit her over the head and moved her, and thereby with force caused the serious physical harm. She drowned. Now what's left is who and why. And who we are is really a function of why. What do we do? No one commits a crime by virtue of their physical appearance or what tendencies you have as a result of genetics. You've had to commit an act. You would have had to be motivated by something. Now, motive, as you will be told in your instructions, is not part of the counts. It's not an element of the charges. But everyone wants to know why things happen the way they happen. I mean, that's just a basic interest in telling the story of how this murder occurred. If there was anything that the defendant wanted, it was control. This young relationship had fallen apart, as sometimes you do. And Regina was clearly moving on with her life. While she cared very much for her kid, what she wasn't going to do was remain with the defendant. And certainly we're aware of Mr. Mikey Perkins, but even absent that, this relationship had deteriorated to a point where they separated. Now, If you take a look, State's Exhibit 21. Something very interesting at base number 000377. Starting there and looking at the complaint, Mr. Hicks lists his address at 304 Dale Avenue. The same as Regina's, his wife. Now, notwithstanding the testimony of some zesty behaviors amongst those in the circles between these two, certainly there was no testimony to suggest that the defendant was living with his wife and having Mike Perkins over. The reason why the defendant would list something like that as divorce is to appear stable and still residing with his wife. Because in this divorce, he was seeking custody. He did not want child support payments in addition to any other debt he was taking on. You go to the property affidavit in the State's Exhibit and scroll down. There again, the parent proceeding affidavit lists his address, 304 Dale Avenue. Under oath, the day before he murdered his wife and went back to his residence, Crystal Hicks. Go to the parent proceeding affidavit. He made $38,000 in '99, $40,000 in 2000. But that year, in this affidavit, he made $15,600. I'm sorry, $15,000. He was laid off as of June. That was several months before October 18, 2001. Money was already tight. He'd already burned up his end, the insurance money, and then he was going back to Regina to ask for her money. And then he was falsifying his domestic relations forms. And if you think about it, money is a sense of control. Money simply isn't printed cotton paper. Money permits to do that which is not free. And the defendant is looking at a situation where he could be paying child support while being laid off. He had to limit his financial exposure, and he had the custody of his kid. And if he had to fudge his domestic relations paper that got filed immediately after he murdered Regina, then that's the way it was just going to be. And control also happened through intimidation. This is a common theme that a lot of the friends expressed. James Dutton, Steve Gates, all these people talked about how it had to be the defendant's way. And think of Montana. couple weeks before Regina's murder. The defendant's hanging out at the Victory Inn, and he sees kindly old Robin Phipps shooting pool, and also sees his wife, tells his wife, this is going to be my new mother-in-law, Jansen's going to be ready to quarantine. Who says that to a mom? Someone who wants control. Come to think of it, there is something else.
Well, let's slip in a commercial break. We'll get you back into that Ohio courtroom for more of the state's closing argument right after this. Stay with us. All right, let's head back to the state of Ohio and pick up the rest of the state's closing argument against Paul Hicks.
There is something else the defendant lied about. He was interviewed by Mike White, and he had made a statement of a Whetstone pond. Mr. White had asked him, "You never been down there?" And the defendant replied, "The closest I've ever been to the pond was probably 4 months ago, when it was warm, and I drove my dirt bike down the access lane to the railroad, and I drove it all the way out to Daniels Road. Come down Daniels Road, went down Egypt, all the way down to South Somerton Road, and come back and went to my buddy's house, where we was right." Now, that seems to be a very specific recollection to avoid being near where your dead wife was recovered out of the pond. Take a look at this map in front of you. This is Exhibit 84, State's Exhibit 84. You can see the signs of the trains relative to the pond. Those tracks are not that far away. And the defendant said he rarely traveled by the pond. The CSX Railway runs east to west through Willard, cutting that city between the north and the south. That railway, the diesel engines, the air brakes, the squeal down the tracks, is a constant reminder of what Willard was, is, and will always be. It's a railroad town. And people were working on that railroad, going to and fro, are passing the Whetstone Pond, the perfect place to conceal a Camaro. The defendant, like even the most provincial resident in Willard, knows where that pond is. Half of Willard was out there when the call came in on October 22nd. The defendant knew exactly where to put his wife and that Camaro. say that one who works at the railroad would not have an idea where that pond is plainly false. Certainly, if you're driving the roadways around that region, maybe you might not see it. If you're on the railway, you're seeing it. Every time. Every time. That's your job. Once you have a job there, involuntarily, you're seeing that pond one way or another. That train track only goes in two directions, east and west. There's a 50% chance every time you're going to see that pond. And given the time constraints between 8 and 9 o'clock, you only have to drive 2 miles and have someone transport you back. And frankly, it wouldn't take very long to walk back from that pond to Steve Gates' residence. Now, the control that the defendant attempts to demonstrate through lying may reach hilarious lows with the penning of this letter. Telling his girlfriend, Lisa Carroll, "Oh, I'm not responsible for any of this at all. It's my twin brother, Remy." This letter would be only slightly more convincing if he had named his twin brother wrong. This is impossible to believe. This is something you would have to make up and expect everyone to believe going all the way back to your birth, because it's a twin brother. The defendant's own mom came out and testified that's just not true. And there's no twin. There's no one else responsible. There's no one else the defendant can vicariously project this murder on. He is responsible. It's just as ridiculous as the claims of suicide or drug use or any of these other reasons at the time Regina turned up missing that have been demonstrated to be dispositively incorrect and falsified. Regina was murdered over 24 years ago. And beyond a reasonable doubt, I'm confident this jury has been fined for conviction for murder on all counts and kidnapping. There's been a 24-year legacy of brutality in this community. You have a child without a mother. And a family that's been fractured, and a community in flux. And it all started when the defendant, Paul Hicks, 24 years ago, launched his wife's coffin in the shape of a 1994 Camaro into the Whetstone Pond. please bring closure to this legacy. Go into the deliberation room. Recall the testimony. You have access to all the exhibits. We are fully confident you will find beyond a reasonable doubt the defendant, Paul Hicks, is guilty of murdering Regina Hicks on October 18th, 2001, in Herring County. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, defense would request 5 minutes to set up and get the technology lined up.
That was the end of the prosecution's initial closing argument there in the state of Ohio. Matthew Mangino with us. Very slow delivery, methodical, and almost sleepy. Do you now, as a defense attorney, change the air? Do you know if someone's pounding their fist, I would think you want to come in the next person and say, "I'm calm." To change it, would you think the defense attorney should and will come in with a little energy here?
Well, that's an interesting question, Ted. I think if I was defending this case, I would want to come in there with a little more emotion right now, a little more animated, with some passion that I believe in my client, to try to counter that. As you said, it was a good closing. It touched on everything that needed to be talked about, but it was slow and methodical. Now you maybe want to go in there and wake those jurors up and say, hey, this case is just far-fetched. I mean, it's 24 years old, and just have a little more passion, a little more belief in your client.
And the reasonable doubt, I would think, is a good one here as well, because of this is lay testimony. And to your point, where were these people 24 years ago? What?
Yeah, I agree with you, Ted. And I think there's room for a passionate argument here. There's room for saying, hey, this is ridiculous. All you have is the word of people who, some of whom haven't talked about this for 24 years, but all of a sudden, come forward. The one thing that I think is really harmful to the defense is, the evil twin. That's hard to get over. I mean, I don't know how the defense explains that away. I don't even know if they try to explain that away and just hit on the fact that there's really no evidence here other than lay witnesses. But the evil twin is tough.
Yeah. And the mom and the sister and Steve Gates. There's a lot there that I think the jury has held on to, despite the delivery. And we'll see what the defense does. Matthew, thank you as always.